Well, good day. Here we are, another segment of Meet the Candidate, and it's a very exciting, I think we're going to have an exciting day because we have a guest speaker here with us. Daniel Brownstein is with us, and of course, Rebecca, and an opportunity for our constituents here to meet the candidates. And what a great way to meet them. How you guys doing today?
We're doing great. Thanks so much for having me, Michael and Rebecca. I've really relished getting to know Rebecca over these past, I guess, 6 or 7 weeks. And congratulations on being the Democratic candidate for House.
I'm totally excited. It's a change in course for sure, but it actually frees up a little bit of time for me to help you out, because I'm really excited about you, getting to know you. When I imagined you coming on and being a part of our podcast, I thought,
Yeah, that was
my
great.
son Wolf. He came to say hello.
hi. I imagined that I was going to say it's not necessarily about us endorsing each other. That's just about people being able to get to know us and letting people form their own opinions about us. But the more I get to know you, the more I want to endorse you.
Yeah, and it's definitely a challenging time to do that right now,
Yeah.
with the coronavirus, keeping a lot of us inside.
Exactly, being sort of in lockdown. Yeah. So Daniel, just a little explanation. What we try and do here is a very casual way for the constituents to meet the candidate. We try and, it's sort of like sitting in someone's living room or dining room or kitchen table and sort of just getting to know you. And my experience from my past is that's how the most successful candidates become, win the election, is but people can relate to them and get to know them. So this is the format that we try and do that with.
Okay.
I think it's great.
And so I wrote down the questions, Michael. You probably should have written down the questions so you could ask them.
I am right here.
All right. So
No,
what's
but
the
what?
first question?
I thought it'd be interesting, Rebecca, coming from you, because again, you and Daniel have, you're forming this bond, and I thought it'd be most appropriate coming from you.
Okay,
So,
all right. And so I had fun trying to think of what I would imagine you would say.
so I'm coming up with the question. She's like, I have the answer for that. I think I have the answer for that.
Okay,
So
but
call Daniel, cancel this. We already have his interview in the can, and we'll send it to him.
But I don't know the answer to this first question. So it is, what was your first job?
Okay, my first job was, I worked for a coffee shop. I was a barista for 6 years. So what happened was, I think I was 14 years old, and I was walking down the main street of our town, and I saw a sign up in the window that there was this coffee shop opening. And this was, before Starbucks was so prevalent. So I was really curious about it. I called the number on it and scheduled an interview. My next stop was a couple blocks down the street, where I checked out a couple of books about how to make coffee.
Really?
And I went home and I practiced on this little piece of junk, $30 espresso machine.
Yeah.
Making lattes and caramel macchiatos and just whatever I could do. So I showed up for the interview. I did pretty well, but then they found out I was only 14 and I wasn't legal to be hired. But I must have made a good impression, because they called back a couple of months later after my 15th birthday, and I got the job and worked there all through high school and college. And it was a really good experience. It's sort of like being a cab driver, because this was like a little corner store with not much room, and so you're pretty much like stuck talking to whoever the customer.
Yeah. See,
for caffeine and talk. So it was a really good experience to learn how to communicate to a bunch of different people from different backgrounds, and I think, draw on that experience today. And I still love coffee. Yes. Although after making all those fancy drinks for 6 years, I'm more of a regular coffee drinker with just a little bit of cream, nothing too fancy.
Oh wow!
Black coffee here. Black.
Nice.
Coffee.
Yeah. That's hardcore. I can drink black coffee, but I prefer a little bit of cream in there as well.
Well, I'm so glad that I know that about you because I was a barista for 2 years as well, from like 18 to 20. And it was one of my favorite jobs I ever had. I love making coffee.
Yeah,
See,
it's great. It's the one thing I'm not much of a morning person. I've obviously become more of a morning person as I've gotten older. But it was a real struggle getting there at 6:30 in the morning back then. And then I'll actually throw in my least successful job, which was in college. I briefly held a job where I had to go and deliver bread to grocery stores.
Really?
And it was like every Saturday morning at, I think,
Like
I want to say I had to be there at 5 in the morning.
Yeah.
And that's not a good job for a college student to
Right.
be somewhere at 5 a.m. on a Saturday morning. So I think I didn't hold on to that job for very long.
So Daniel, funny story. Here's how I know. My neighbor used to deliver bread to all the restaurants, and he would leave either between 4 or 4:30 in the morning to deliver bread. So I knew it was an early morning job when you mentioned that. And here's what I love about that question, Rebecca. I love the fact that Daniel went out.
I'm just thinking, who is this? Yeah, I'm just thinking, like, who is the idiot that's hiring a college kid to be somewhere at 5 a.m. on a Saturday? Really, the only chance I had of making it there on time would be if I stayed up all night and just right there.
Right. Here's what I love about that story, Daniel. The fact that you went out and you researched. This tells about the candidate that people have. You went out and researched how to make the coffee. You prepared yourself for your interview. I think that's brilliant. I don't know many people that actually would do that. That is great.
I try to be hyper prepared for things. We actually had a candidate debate last night, and I really do stress out ahead of time about all of this. And so I try to be over prepared. And that was sort of reinforced by a boss that I had later in life. He quoted Bobby Knight, the basketball coach, who I really, as an Ohio State fan, I'm not a big Bobby Knight person. But
right.
Essentially, the quote is that the will to win isn't nearly as important as the will to prepare. And I think the point is that a lot of people want to win, but they're not willing to put in the work ahead of time to make that happen. So I really just try to prepare for every appearance that I make.
You're absolutely right.
Topic that I think is going to come up.
You are absolutely right. I've owned several businesses. I've owned several pieces of real estate. I've had successes in life. I've had losses in life. But I always say one thing: everybody wants what you have, but they're not willing to do what it takes to get it. And it's the same premise there. And I completely agree. Everybody wants to do that, but they're not willing to do what it takes to get there.
Well, I think another thing that Daniel and I have in common was I heard you say in your interview with Quentin Washington was that you feel like you've been preparing for this position for your whole life.
Yes.
And I feel the same way. I really have been doing the work. Even though I didn't know I was going to be here, I just kind of ended up that way where I've been preparing and preparing and preparing.
I think life is pretty amazing in that respect, that you start out somewhere and you don't really know where you're going to end up, but once you get there, it makes total sense.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. By the way, Daniel, that was an excellent interview with Quentin. Rebecca had forwarded it to me, and I want to watch it to prepare for this. And that was an excellent interview on both parts, Quentin's part and of course yours. I really enjoyed and learned a lot from that segment.
Thank you very much.
And your opening last night.
He asked a lot of really tough questions. He asked. I was just going to say he asked a lot of very tough questions that I thought were good questions, and I was very thankful that I had prepared the way that I had.
Yes.
Some of them were pretty unexpected.
I was going to say he did not toss you any. He didn't lob you any softballs. They were hard-hitting questions. On his part, and I think you handled him very well on your part. That's why I thought it was a very good two-way interview that took place.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So our next burning question for you is, what does your wife think about you running?
Okay, so my wife, if as a cartoon character, I would describe her as Scrappy Doo, the little, Scooby's, I think, little brother or cousin, and
Yes,
he's,
it was, yeah.
he's ready to fight everybody. That's my wife in a nutshell. She is feisty, she is opinionated, she is competitive,
Wow.
and in our relationship, I'm more of the even-keeled one. So I would say that she loves the fact that I'm competing for this position. I think she is solidly in my corner. We're a team. If you look at my campaign, it's really me and her at the center of it. She's a graphic designer, which is like, gold for me. She can crank out these good-looking signs and postcards. But what I will say is that she is worried that I'm going to win because of what that entails. That basically, this is not a job that you run for to get a paycheck. It pays, I think, $10,400 a year, and it requires that that the representative stays in Columbia Tuesday through Thursday, beginning in January and going until the final budget is passed in June. So with two young kids who are very involved in sports and different activities, I think that part of it worries her, just being on her own with all that responsibility plus work every week. So, but as far as I can tell, she's not trying to sabotage my campaign, and she's been a great sounding board for me to help with my message.
I'll tell you what, Daniel, people always say, she sounds like the perfect person to have in a foxhole with you.
She is.
Yeah.
She's not going to let me slack. She's on me to really be all in on this. And I'm very grateful for her support.
Good for you. That sounds fantastic. Good for you. Rebecca, you had another question? Otherwise, I had a question to ask.
Yeah, you ask, Michael.
No, we have the list. Let's continue on the list.
Well, you might ask the question better, so go ahead and ask it.
Go ahead. I can fill in.
Okay, so what do you imagine the biggest challenge will be having this position?
I think the biggest challenge is going to be time management. It takes a lot on the side and two children. So I think that the toughest thing is going to be to find the time to get everything done. That's not to say I don't think I can get everything done, but there are just a lot of challenges right now, a lot of, I would say, very big things that need to be addressed in this state. And in order to accomplish these things, it's going to take a lot of effort, both in researching the problems and the solutions and building up a bipartisan coalition to address them. We have 124 people in our state House of Representatives. I believe somewhere in the vicinity of 80 of them are Republicans and approximately 40 of them are Democrats. And I don't see that proportion changing. I think hopefully we can make some gains here and there, but it's still going to be a Republican-controlled chamber, and it's going to take a lot of work to bring people over onto our side towards some of these common sense solutions that Rebecca and I are pushing for.
I think that's an interesting challenge, Daniel, because either you're going to have to make lots of friends on the Republican side, or you guys are going to have to meet in the middle of the aisle to sort of get things done. So I think you have a very interesting, both of you are going to have a very interesting position to be in Columbia.
I agree. I think that the thing that's positive about the State House is, I don't know if you know how they seat people there, but they seat them by delegation. So Rebecca and I will be sitting with the other representatives from around our area,
Yeah.
I think that helps make it a little less partisan when you're working so closely with a local group.
That's
But
interesting.
on the flip side, that also kind of makes it competitive between areas of the state. So it's a trade-off, you know. In one sense, maybe it makes it less partisan, but on the other hand, it makes it more of a geographic issue where people in the low country are trying to get resources, and in order to do that, they're having to take resources or fight with other areas of the state that also wants that.
Right.
For that money.
Those same resources, exactly. Yeah. You know, I talked to a politician before. My background has been in radio, and I spent 12 years dealing with other political candidates, producing shows with them. So there's the one, you reminded me of a comment one of the politicians made. It was a Democrat, and it was the same thing. He was in a largely Republican House, and he said to one of his colleagues, he said, we got to keep in mind, yes, we're arguing, but we're arguing over the same point. We're arguing over the betterment of the state in our area. And I think at the end of the day, that's where you're going to be.
Yeah, that's what you hope, is that everybody recognizes that they're there to serve the people of this state.
Right.
And I'm hopeful that that's the case. I do know several representatives whom are Republicans, who I'm very good friends with. I work well with them, and I think that we can find some common ground here and there. And actually, before I let this answer go, I was also in radio. That's what I was a broadcasting major in college, and right after that, I went to work for a talk radio station. I could just never make enough money at it that I picked another career as a newspaper reporter and sort of went with that, and I'm not sure that's any better than radio, to be honest.
Right. I was very fortunate. I spent 14 years in radio, and so as you know, I'm broadcasting here from New Jersey, so we're nestled here between Philadelphia and New York. So although New Jersey is a small market, we're considered a big market because we reach into both New York and Philadelphia. We're considered New York and Philadelphia metro. And as a result, the salaries sort of reflected that. So
that's good. That's good. So I'm going to flip this around and ask you a question then. Where do you fall on the cheesesteak battle?
that is a very interesting question. I like the cheese whiz, so I fall with
cheese whiz instead of
yes, exactly.
All right, so the next question.
There's been a few times where I've seen ads pop up on Facebook where you can order a cheesesteak online. But I'm wondering, how does a cheesesteak travel from New Jersey to South Carolina? How does that taste when it gets there? I'm sure it's not the same.
You better pay extra for the overnight, at least. Overnight delivery.
Yeah, for sure.
That's funny. All right. So I want to know, this is my question, is what do you do on the weekends when you have downtime? Do you have hobbies or?
Yeah. And this pains me to say, my wife and I really love to go to see concerts, and we probably go see a show at least once a month. And we had all these grand plans to see. We were going to go to Merle Fest and see John Prine and Willie Nelson.
Oh, wow.
Unfortunately, that was canceled, and we won't have another opportunity to see John. They involve live music. This past year, we actually subscribed to the Charleston Symphony Orchestra for the first time, and went to, I believe, five shows, and then the sixth one was canceled because of the pandemic. But that was really something new for us, and was.
Oh, we lost him?
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's right.
Is that where do they have those concerts? Is that Gilliard or?
Yeah, that's at the Gilliard, and it was just really it kind of expanded my base of knowledge with music, and I kind of went into it thinking symphony sounds kind of boring and stuffy, and really it wasn't.
Not at all.
Fantastic. I highly recommend it.
Yes.
But then other than that, a lot of our time is obviously spent with our children. My son plays hockey, so that's a big commitment during the week and also on the weekend. And my daughter, Selah, who's 6, she's a superstar soccer player. So we
that's great.
do a lot of soccer practices and games. I occasionally fill in as the coach, and I really enjoy being involved in their lives, just as my parents were involved in mine.
Here's what I have to know after everything that you just said. To your constituents, if it's the old adage: if you want something done, give it to a busy person. And I think if they're giving you their vote, they're giving it to a busy person, and they're going to see things are getting done for sure.
Yeah, I think that was my major reason for running for this position.
That's our other question.
Yeah, we've had the same representative here for 11 years. His name's Mike Satili. He's a Republican, and he's retiring. But what got me interested in it were 2 things. One was we have a plastic bag ban here in the different communities that make up my district. And there was a big fight in Columbia over whether local governments have the ability to ban single-serve plastics.
Right.
And during that time, I wrote to the representative, Mike Satili, and I never heard back from him. And then let's fast forward a little bit after that, we start to have these little plastic pellets that are used in the plastic making process that we're washing up on our beaches,
yes.
Especially over on Sullivan's.
Yes.
I wrote to him about that as well and never heard back. So basically, we've been represented here by somebody who, as far as I can tell, has very little interest in the actual process of governing and interacting with constituents. And so I think that we need somebody here who is going to talk to everybody, listen to everybody, and just solidly have their district's interests at heart. And I think that that's something that we've been lacking, which is a real shame.
I think it does require a lot of thoughtfulness to do this job. And I also think that you have to be really uber organized. You have to have a plan going into it and a way to correspond with people that's efficient. And if I don't really know anything about him, but in general, unless you have the technology already in place when you get there, then it's kind of hard to catch up, it seems like. So having everything in place to be able to respond to people easily, and like Joe Cunningham, we lost you.
There he is.
Like, have you been keeping up with Joe Cunningham during the pandemic? He's done an excellent job of just
Go ahead, Daniel.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, yes, I have. I've caught several. That was of interest to me was when he was talking to different brewery owners and talking about some of the problems that they're facing during this pandemic. I think that they would love to be able to deliver their product directly to the consumer. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that that's reflective of some other things. We need to make sure that the various laws and regulations that are on the books are not holding small businesses back from innovating. I think that we need to be cognizant that.
Oh, we lost him. But he was making a really good point there. He is right.
He is absolutely right. Go ahead, Daniel. You continue that thought. That was the excellent point you're making.
Did we?
I just think that we need to make sure that we're not holding people back from innovating. I think that laws that were passed, 30, 40, 50 years ago might not apply to what we have going on now. And we need to give businesses, especially small ones, the flexibility to meet customers on these new terms.
Absolutely. And you know what? At the end of the day, it's not only helping small business, it's helping the economy. It's keeping the economy rolling, and it's keeping the money flowing as well.
Well, it's not only doing that, it's also giving an avenue for the economy to expand.
Well, that's exactly right. That's my point.
So,
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that there's a couple of things going on. One is that tourism is a huge part of both of our districts. I think, I don't have the figure in front of me, but tourism, I believe, is a $24 billion industry for South Carolina, and $10 billion of that is generated by the Charleston area.
Wow.
I think that we realistically have lost 2 seasons of tourism. We've lost the spring when we have a lot of weddings here in spring break.
Yeah.
And we're losing summer. I think that we will have some tourists here, but it's going to be a much smaller number. So the small businesses here in this district are hurting, and I think are going to continue to hurt until people feel safe. We can open restaurants and bars and all these small businesses, but the customers aren't going to be there until they feel safe.
That's a great point.
I think
right.
In order to do that, we need to have a fully funded public health system. If you look at DHEC, which is our Department of Health and Environmental Control, they used to have a budget of $167 million back in 1998. And now their budget is about $104 million.
Wow.
So they've been losing money. They've lost essentially $60 million a year. And I think that hobbled our response to the pandemic. And I think that doesn't bode well for our recovery from the pandemic. If you look at the percentage of people in this state who have been tested for COVID-19, we are one of the lowest in the country at 1.6%. I think it's impossible for people to make the judgment about whether or not it's safe to open things up or to go back into society until we are testing a much higher percentage of our population.
Right. That's an excellent point. Daniel, we're gonna start wrapping up this segment. Any last thoughts before we wrap things up?
Yeah, I'm in a competitive Democratic primary on June 9th. I have an opponent. I think there are some very clear distinctions between he and I, although we do agree on a lot of issues. I think that he is more positive about how our state's reacting to the COVID-19 crisis, where I think I'm a little bit more realistic about it. And also another big differentiator is that he's opposed to widening and expanding our roadways, and I think that's crazy. Obviously, public transportation is a big issue, but you cannot have people sitting in traffic for 2 hours a day trying to get to and from their job.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm just not convinced that his position on the matter is to sit well with the rest of this district, especially in the general election. And this is my daughter Selah and my son Wolf.
Hi.
I was going to say, I think you have some campaign workers in the background.
Yeah, and I'll say I'm the only candidate in my district that has school-age children. So I'm doing it for these guys. I want them to have what I had when I grew up, and I'm very concerned about the future that we're providing them both here in South Carolina and nationally. So that's really one of my driving forces.
I think that's a great springboard for another exciting segment. We're going to have another segment with Daniel where he's going to talk about education coming up. So we'll have a to be continued segment coming up. And I'll tell you what, Daniel, here's what I'm going to do. When you win, I'm going to come down personally with some Geno's cheesesteaks so we can celebrate in style. How's that?
That is awesome. And I'll hook you up with some local craft beer, and we'll make a good time out of it.
Sounds like a meal to me. Yeah.